Hi friends, thank you for tuning in to the Concussion Coach Podcast. I'm Bethany Lewis, the Concussion Coach. I'm a neurological occupational therapist and certified life coach, and I specialize in guiding people through their concussion recovery journey. I am passionate about helping people understand their injury, speed up their recovery, and reclaim control over their life post-concussion. The purpose of this podcast is to help increase awareness of concussions and the impact they can have on a person's life, and to bring hope to people who have suffered a concussion and those who love them. I firmly believe that sharing stories and knowledge about concussions will bring important light and understanding to this misunderstood and often invisible injury. The information in this podcast is meant to bring that awareness and hope and is not meant as medical advice. The opinions shared are those of the interviewees and my own. If you are suffering with lingering concussion symptoms, I have created a concussion coaching program specifically for you. I will be your mentor to guide you through your recovery journey, offering help with understanding and managing your symptoms, setting achievable goals, and learning how to manage your own thoughts and nervous system in order to get control over your life again. If this program sounds like something that would help you or someone you love, sign up for a free consultation. In the consultation, you'll get valuable information and resources and gain hope for your future. Sign up for your free consultation at the link in the show notes or at my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com. Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Concussion Coach Podcast. Before I introduce my guest today, I just wanted to make sure that you all know about the free guide that is available on my website. It's the 5 best ways to support your loved one dealing with a concussion. If you have a friend or family member who is struggling with post-concussion symptoms, or you're the one struggling and would like your loved ones to know more about what you're going through and how they can help, head over to my website, theconcussioncoach.com, and download the free guide. I am excited to introduce to you my guest today. Jessie Rain Anne Smith is a qualified mindfulness-based stress reduction teacher, which is MBSR teacher,
Yes.
trained through the University of California, San Diego's Mindfulness-Based Professional Training Institute. She has also completed Dr. David Treleaven's, is that right? Did I pronounce that right? Okay. Treleaven's trauma-sensitive mindfulness training, and was one of a select few chosen by Dr. Treleaven for mentorship in 2022. Following a car accident and brain injury in 2013, Jessie was advised to take up mindfulness to help manage her symptoms. Mindfulness was a huge help, but it was also a horrific hindrance. Some practices were too cognitive, and others sent her into panic and dissociation. In time, Jessie learned to modify mindfulness. She went on to found Mindful Concussion, an initiative dedicated to sharing her lessons with others. Her Mindful Concussion course, additional educational offerings, and her forthcoming book, The Power and Perils of Mindfulness for Brain Injury, provide practical strategies survivors and teachers can implement to modify mindfulness for brain injury. So I think that is so awesome, Jessie. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today. Thank you for being here.
Oh, I'm really happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Yes, absolutely. So I have to say that I really, really love the title of your book, The Power and Perils of Mindfulness for Brain Injury. I am a huge proponent of mindfulness. It can be very powerful, as you say, in so many ways for human brains and nervous systems. And I believe that it can be particularly helpful for people with injured brains and nervous systems. It can address some of the very specific concerns that people dealing with concussions are dealing with. And I'm sure we'll get into more of those things later, but I remember being surprised when I first heard that it could be problematic for people. I didn't realize that there were conditions that would make some of the mindfulness practices not only less effective, but actually cause problems for them. So I'm really looking forward to learning more from your experience and training. So this will be so good. But before we dive into the mindfulness specific piece, I would love to hear your experience. Like, share with us the things that led you into wanting to learn about mindfulness and your concussion experience. So go ahead and let's just hear about the concussion first.
Sure. Yeah. So I was driving to work in 2013, and just a little trigger warning. I'm going to just explain my accident. So I was driving along a main road in Vancouver, and just out of the corner of my eye, I saw this car coming. I'm like, what? And and the last thing I remember is I slammed on the brakes, and I don't remember the accident. I heard it was very loud. I heard from others that it was very loud. And I T-boned her, but it was her fault. And the cops actually ended up giving her a ticket, which is kind of funny, but she was fine and I was not. And so that was the beginning. And at first, really, it seemed almost in a way that the car was in worse shape than I was. And my symptoms didn't come on quite as strongly until day 5, when I took the piece of paper, my doctor, who I'd seen the day after the accident, and said, call the early response concussion rehab center in Vancouver. And I did. And they said, if it's really bad, go to emergency. So I did. And the doctor there said, yeah, you've got a concussion. You need to just go back home and then soon get in touch with this rehab center. But he made a foolish mistake, and he gave me some oxy for my headache. So there I was, like, nauseous from not having eaten, kind of high on the oxy. It was a disaster. So lesson learned, don't do that. But I was very lucky, because very early on I was connected to a fabulous publicly funded rehab center here in Vancouver. And at first I was in the early response team, and they gave me lots of education. And I was quite surprised, honestly, when they said that one of the best things I could do was what I could do for myself rather than someone else, and that mindfulness was really on the top of their list. And at first I thought, isn't there some sort of pill or treatment that would be better? And of course, it takes a village, and we need so much help from practitioners and others. But I learned in time that, that the practice that I turn to daily is my mindfulness practice. So that was a spark for it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I am curious, we're still talking about the concussion experience. What about that experience of having a concussion surprised you?
Oh, well, I think the real surprise came 2.5 years later when I, kind of like an A student, I did all the things. I was diligent with my rehab. My people said to me, Jessie, just go a little bit lighter on your strategies, lighten up a bit. I would say, though, actually, truthfully, I wasn't as good at doing more extensive cardio. I went on regular walks, but I didn't, it was hard for me to get into deeper cardio, partly because I have other health problems with my neck and my back and all this stuff. So that's a regret I have, especially now that we know more about the importance of that. But really, I did everything that I could to manage my symptoms and to improve. And I did see, obviously, lots of improvement from the beginning. But at 2.5 years, I went to see a neurologist as a part of my we have a publicly owned car insurance, and so there was a legal battle related to that, and so as a part of that, I saw a neurologist, and he took a look at me and he said, Jessie, the woman who was here before you, she's at year 4, and she's still trying to live her old life, and she's just miserable, right? And he said, you have to find a way to be at a level of activity and work that you can actually manage without always being overwhelmed. And of course, now we know that we have to find that balance of not doing too much, but also not doing so little that we're just isolating and not pushing gently into our symptoms to have improvement. There is a sweet spot there that is actually very difficult as a survivor to find that, because too often we do too much and we crash, or we end up doing too little and not improving or having that growth opportunity. So that was me at 2.5 years, and I did at that time decide I went from what had been a 3/4 time workload to a half-time workload, and that made all the difference. Then I had the time to do the self-care that I was doing. Instead of on the side of my desk, I was actually able to do it as a part of my job now. Yeah.
Oh, that's
So
awesome.
that was the surprise. I can't believe that I went 2.5 years without knowing about persistent post-concussion symptoms. I somehow made it that far without ever even realizing that I could have ongoing symptoms. And of course, in the beginning, the people that I spoke to said, well, most people recover within weeks or months. And I just thought that would be me. And now I know, I've learned a lot more about myself. And I know that I have a trauma history that meant that when I came to that car accident, at the moment of that accident, my nervous system was already very compromised. And so in a way, it's not as surprising when we look at the big picture of the context And I think there's more evidence that those of us that do go on to have prolonged symptoms, some of it may be that we didn't get quite the best care early on, but some of it also is the state of our nervous system at the moment of the injury.
Yeah, that is such an interesting point. The brain and nervous system that you bring into that moment of when that injury occurs makes a difference for how it plays out afterwards. It is fascinating how we can't really predict what it's gonna look like for somebody after they have an accident like that. And that is surprising that they didn't tell you that was a possibility, or maybe they did and it just didn't, you were like, well, that's not going to be me, so it didn't stick or something. I don't know, it just is.
It's probably more something like that, but I know initially I was quite worried and they kept saying, oh, it's only in the first few months, and there was
I have a few questions, so there's some questions that I love to pull out of people, get some really good conversation about the concussion experience. But I'm just going to pare those down to a few for you because I want to focus a lot more on the mindfulness piece, but there are some that I think would be really helpful for people to hear. So I would love to hear what things were most helpful for you in discovering and loving yourself post-concussion, because so many things can be different afterwards. And how did you manage that piece of knowing and loving yourself?
Oh, yeah. I wrote a poem, which I can share with you, called Coming to Grips with the New Quiet Requiring Me. And it really is about that, about kind of realizing, oh, wow, I'm actually having to live the way everybody should live in some ways, right? Like paying attention to my nervous system, noticing when I'm doing too much, not saying yes too often. Like everybody should be doing that. And it was really, for me, it was around finally realizing that in our society in particular, there's this override button that we hit all the time. Oh no, I'm not going to sleep. I'm going to do too much. I'm going to get busy. And we just keep pressing it. And after the accident, I kept and it wasn't working. I'm like, press. Why isn't this thing working? I can't override this stuff anymore. I'm way overwhelmed. So I had to, and this is where the mindfulness piece comes in, is that it's so, you can't really learn how to pace yourself or take micro breaks or properly have proper, hydration and nutrition, or even just remember all the things that you're supposed to be remembering about self-care. None of that is possible without actually finding your way to mindful attention. Getting yourself out of your worries about the future and regrets about the past and coming into the present. That you need to build that skill to be able to do a lot of what our OTs and etc. ask us to do.
That is such a good point. And it is, I mean, I've heard this and I agree wholeheartedly that awareness is the first step to all change, anything that we're trying to do. Like we need to be aware that it's a thing for us that we need to be working on. And so that mindful attention really does make a difference. And for like what you said, for all of the other things that we want to be doing to take root and take place, we need to have that. I think that's beautiful. Thank you. If you could go back in time, what advice would you give yourself in the early days of your injury?
I would say, Jessie, this is going to be a long and winding path. And at the end, not even ended, right? It's never ending. But what I can say to be true is that although I do have ongoing symptoms that are way better than they used to be, and I am actually in many ways healthier than I was before. And it may seem like a contradictory thing to say, but in my path, I ended up doing a lot of trauma healing. I ended up learning mindfulness. I ended up being much more aware of what my body, listening to my body and what it's constantly telling us things. It's constantly saying, please slow down. Please have a drink of water. Please, notice your symptoms are here because you're doing too much. So listen to that. And I'm really grateful for that. And I know that if I hadn't had my car accident, I would be more lost in the suffering that I was experiencing. And now I feel I have much more agency in my life.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I got chills when you shared that. Thank you so much for sharing that. I hope that will be helpful for somebody hearing that perspective. And it's not an uncommon one, but it gets me every time. Like, man, it is astounding how that can change. That change can happen. Like the positives that can come out of this. I guess they call it post-traumatic growth or something like that's one of the terms for it, I think. But it is so beautiful and so hard to see in the moment, I'm sure. So hearing it from somebody who's been there, I appreciate you saying that. I hope that will be helpful for people. What advice would you give to people who are loving and supporting somebody who's dealing with concussion?
Take up a mindfulness practice like yesterday because it's hard, right? If you're a parent or a loved one, even a boss, having your own, it can be challenging, and so having your own practice to find ways to nurture your own nervous system and give yourself some self-compassion and find ways to have your own self-regulation, because your partner may have been a source of regulation for you, and they may not be as much anymore if they are themselves so often dysregulated and in a state, in a tizzy, in a way that they can't be the rock for you that they used to be. And that's really hard. And that's where that compassion for yourself as a caregiver would be. Or maybe a sense of loss of, what my child used to be and what they are now, and the time that I care for them. And it doesn't discount any of the love and deep connection that can be there, but it is a mourning process, and mindfulness can be a beautiful hand to hold you through that.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Let's dive into the mindfulness thing. I would love to hear so the power and perils of mindfulness for brain injury. Can we start with the power? I would love to hear your definition of mindfulness and the benefits that it has specifically for people with brain injury.
So, there's so many different ways to think of mindfulness, but one way, that a good way in, is to think of what it's when you're not being mindful, which is how most people are all the time, is lost in thought, whether you have brain injury or not, right? We're lost in regrets about the past and worries about the future. And of course, with the brain injury, that's more like those things can be very real and very intense, right? So mindfulness is about bringing our attention from the past, from the future, and landing right here in the present. And in this present moment, things are often not as bad as they are, as our worries about how they might be in the future, right? So it gets us right here, right now, as opposed to what if, and it's like, oh, right now I have a headache. It's not that fun, but there's this sense that you learn of, I can handle it. And what's so important is this sense of like, human bodies are made to, if we face a difficulty, if we perceive a threat, we go into fight, flight, or freeze. This is brilliant. It keeps us safe when we're actually in danger. But when we're actually safe, most of our symptoms are not dangerous. Once we're over that kind of initial, maybe you have a brain bleed kind of scenario, they're just not a threat, but our body can perceive them as a threat. And therefore, when we get that nausea, or we're feeling cognitive fatigue, or whatever your symptom is, the body goes, uh-oh, there's something wrong, and we launch a fight, flight, and freeze response. And this is what is called faulty neuroception. We're noticing a danger that's actually not needing that kind of, it's like overkill, that response. So a big part of the mindful concussion approach that I teach is about having people viscerally understand, so that your body knows that your symptoms are not a threat. And if then we can just be with, oh, it's a headache. Okay, I can manage that. It's no fun, but it's our fear of our symptoms, our pushing away from our symptoms. Like, no, I'm going to mask it. I'm going to avoid it. Or it's like the opposite, which is like getting lost in them, like just like thinking about them and being like overwhelmed with them. And mindfulness often offers this kind of middle path, right between those extremes where it's like, right? And I'm trying to do it with my hands, but you guys aren't seeing that. Sorry. This middle path where you're not pushing, you're not pulling, and there's an understanding that we can most of the time we can handle our symptoms, and sometimes something more serious will happen and we need outside help. But so that's part of it. So that's a huge help right there. Another, oh, sorry, go on.
No, yeah, I just love that description of the fear versus the getting lost in it. I think it is that skill of acknowledging it, like saying, yes, it is. I'm not ignoring it. I'm not pushing it away. I'm saying, yeah, I see it. Here it is. But also not having judgment of it, not making it more than it is either. It's like, okay, this is it. I know how to manage it. It's going to be okay. But also, like, I'm not going to the future, like I'm never going to get better. This is never, like, all of those spinny thoughts that we tend to go to. That I think that's the point of the mindfulness, is to just acknowledge it without judgment or like projecting further meaning.
Yeah. The whole, it's funny because that line, the line about without judgment, I always joke because so that's actually, so getting a little bit into how I modify. So I don't add the noticing judgment right away, because when I was first learning mindfulness, it was like, okay, bring your attention here and do this and do that and and notice your judgment. And I'm like, oh my God, that's way too much. So when I teach it, I do one step at a time. We do get to looking at our judgment and how painful that can be, judgment of ourselves, judgment of others, but I leave that a bit to the side, because when my experience of when I was learning, the teachers went, so the first step really is attentional control, this bring your attention to the present, and even just bringing our attention off our symptoms and on to the present moment could be our breath. It could be a flower, it could be the breeze in the tree, it could be the taste of chocolate, like something other than our symptoms. That alone is a huge, huge relief to know that we have this agency. I didn't realize I could actually direct my attention somewhere else other than where it was going. So that's the first piece. And in the way that I teach it, I teach this bring your attention to the present moment with nurturing anchors of attention. So I purposely build in nervous system regulation from the start as the initial goal, so that people are coming to the present and they're they're savoring the beauty of a tree, for example, and so they're doing slow, gentle yoga, mindful self-compassion, long, slow, deep breathing, and walking in nature. These kinds of things with the purposeful intention to get some kind of self-regulation on board is so important compared to the way that I was taught, which was there was a lot of noticing. I can get into the perils later, but this is sort of the way that it's very powerful. And there's just one more I wanted to mention, and that is that with a brain injury, we often have physiological changes that reduce our capacity to manage stress when it arises. So we're going to go into nervous system dysregulation, either hyper-aroused anger, anxiety, fear, or we're going to go into hypo-arousal of kind of numb and down. And either one of those, once we go into it, and we can tend to go more easily because of physiological changes, then after that we actually have different physiological changes that make it difficult to re-regulate and self-regulate once we're dysregulated. So it's like a double whammy that's really, really hard. So many survivors and those who care for us will notice that we react like something that's a small thing we're freaking out about. And it's quite confusing to be like, wow, I know that's not that stressful. Why am I doing that? So in mindfulness, we learn this beautiful pause. And it's hard sometimes to remember in the middle of something scary or difficult, but with practice we can more easily remember, this is a difficult moment. I can take a pause, and I can then instead of reacting automatically in this fight, flight, or freeze kind of autonomic system behaving for us, through the pause, we give our thinking brain enough time to catch up and realize, oh, this isn't actually, we don't need to react like that. We can actually choose a response, a wise response that is based on looking at the scenario and deciding what we want to do next. It's really about cutting that autonomic system from taking over when it's not needed.
So good. There's a quote that you basically just said it. You probably know the quote by Viktor Frankl, I believe.
Yes.
It says between stimulus and response, there is a pause, right? Is it a pause? And that, and like, I can't quote it. I'll have to like look it up and put it in the show notes.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Therein lies the your power to choose or something. I don't remember. It's so good though. But yeah, that is exactly it. Like, rather than just responding, if we can pause, I love that you called it a beautiful pause, that is where we have the chance to have that higher thinking brain take control again a little bit. So that's beautiful. Keep going. I'm loving this. What else? What else is the power? Like, what is the benefit of mindfulness for, well, actually, hold on. Sorry, I'm going to ask you something else. Can you tell us what is the difference between mindfulness and meditation? I know that sometimes, like, I've heard a lot of different things, so I'd love to hear your take on
yeah.
It
can get a little bit, tricky as to, and different people can take it in a different way, but in meditation, so we are just practicing coming to the present moment, and it's the only thing we're doing. We can be sitting, we can be lying down, we can be standing, or we're walking. But it's kind of like when we're doing the scales of music, right? We're practicing coming into the present. And within that, there's different ways, there's different modalities to do it, but the basic idea is presencing. And then when we're mindful, when we're doing that, we are being mindful, but then we can also do mindfulness in daily life. And that's kind of like, instead of doing scales, we're singing, right? So then we're chopping the carrots and we're talking to our kids and we're in a meeting and we're writing emails. And it's like, it's the attention that we bring to everything that we do in daily life.
Oh, I like that. That's a cool way to think about it. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I like that differentiation there, and that mindfulness it's the meditation piece of like being present, but it's spread throughout your day. It's like throughout.
And you can do mindful meditation as well. Like, they're not separate, but that's the way I think of it. I mean, maybe somebody else would, I'm sure other people would have a different take, but.
Yeah. Okay. Well, cool. Thank you for that. I'll just throw out a couple of the things that I have seen, or the benefits that I am aware of that mindfulness can have for people dealing with brain injury specifically. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And anything come up for you. But I know a lot of times you mentioned at the beginning, the attention piece is so important. And a lot of times people dealing with concussions have a lot of trouble focusing. And so, the mere act of noticing that your thoughts are somewhere else and bringing them to right now is practicing focus and attention. So like that concentration piece, I think the mindfulness can have benefits in that space, as well as, we were talking about the nervous system and the regulation and the, emotional regulation. The more kind of in tune you are with your body and how you're doing, the more quickly you'll recognize if you get out of the homeostasis, if you're getting out of where you need to be or want to be. And then it gives you those tools to help you come back. And I think those are two really kind of key pieces that we might not, when you think of mindfulness, you're not realizing, oh, this is actually helping me improve in my attention and concentration, which then has benefits for memory, because if you've learned and taken that information in the first place because you're paying attention, then you have more ability to remember things. So there's like cognitive benefits, mental, emotional benefits. It's just like, I feel like there's a lot of good stuff that can come out of this. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on those pieces and anything else that specifically helps for people with brain injury.
Yeah, so for sure. And without really realizing it, I actually stayed with what we could call like a concentration practice for quite a long time. So the first step of, as I mentioned before, pretty much any type of contemplative practice, mindfulness meditation, whatever the teacher, the style, is attentional control. Bring your attention to the present. And there's three parts to that. So one is you've noticed that you're saying, oh, I'm practicing now. So I'm going to bring my attention to the present. You have something that you're going to pay attention to. It could be your breath. It could be the feeling of your yoga pose, whatever it is. And you let your attention really land there. You try to imagine your attention almost like touching it, and rather than sort of hovering above. And then inevitably, very natural, even this happens to even the Dalai Lama, the attention will flit off. And some days this happens a lot, very quickly. These three steps, come to the present, be in the present, get lost, are all part of practice. A lot of times people think it only counts if they stay a long time, when they're staying present. And it's not, it's all three steps. And so when we get lost in thought quickly, it's not as fun, to be honest. And it can be quite common at first. And sometimes people say to me, oh, Jessie, I can't be mindful. My mind's too busy. I'm like, you think you're special? I mean, it's true. Some people do have busier minds than others, but nonetheless, pretty much most people, not everyone, but most people do have pretty busy minds. And with the brain injury, the Buddhist term monkey mind is even harder because it's cognitively exhausting. But so this piece of the days that we stay, the days that we come and go quickly may not be as enjoyable, but they give us skills to stay. They give us more chance to practice this come back to the present muscle. And then it just becomes more natural, like, oh, right, okay, I'm going to come back to my anchor. I'm going to come back to the present. And then some days, especially as we get better and we have more practice, we can stay longer in the present. And it can be such a relief to just allow the attention to land somewhere. Give it like a little resting place, And for an injured brain, it's just like a salve all over the tired brain to be able to rest like that. And yeah, so I practice that, just coming back to the present on a pleasant anchor for quite a long time before I really had capacity to do some of the other practices required more cognition and that had more movement in the mind. I just really needed, and this is what I teach, is more concentration practices to start before we go into the very powerful and useful other practices, but not too soon.
Yeah, thank you. I would love to hear more of your story with how, like, what your experience with mindfulness was and how you got introduced to it and then discovered that some was good and some was not so good. And yeah, if you want to go into that,
I can do
we
that.
could talk about the perils after that.
Yeah. So I got a perfect sort of segue to do that. So I had been doing this gentle yoga, long, slow, deep breathing that I had discovered through the brain streams. The BC Brain Injury Association had this beautiful practice of long, slow, deep breaths. I had been doing nature practice. These three things really held me for nearly a year, and I was just really, without realizing it, doing concentration practice with nurturing anchors of attention. And I did yin and restorative yoga, and it was so helpful.
Was this right at the beginning, or
the first 9-10 months? Yeah. And then, so there I was learning in various ways. And one day I woke up not feeling that great. And I usually felt pretty good in the morning. So I was frustrated that in the morning I didn't feel good. And I thought, oh, I did too much yesterday. I was feeling kind of woe is me, And then I heard the voice of the psychologist that I'd been working with at the kind of more advanced version of that concussion care rehab center I told you. So I was in the early response. Later, I got into the more advanced one, which was working with the psychologist and an OT. And I had his little voice in my head said, Jessie, bring mindfulness to the hard stuff. Like, see if you can be with that. And in that moment, I just allowed myself to feel those feelings, to stop fighting them and pushing them away. And I just thought, oh, okay, I've got a headache. I'm feeling nauseous. I'm feeling tired. I'm feeling just emotional about all of that. And I just somehow let go of the fight. And for a second, it all kind of bubbled up and sort of got worse for a second. But then I felt this beautiful dissipation. Like, oh, I feel like I had let off a giant piece of armor and sword that I'd been fighting my symptoms with. And the relief I felt to just let go of that fight and just allow my symptoms to be there was so powerful. It is when it was that very moment that I really got the power of mindfulness for brain injury. And there all the other pieces before that were very important as well, but that was just another level of like the deep being with, the allowing it to be here, to know that we have the agency, to have the wherewithal, the bravery really to let our guard down. Because that guard is there to protect us. And it's really hard to actually ask that part of ourselves to let go. And I don't, it took me, like I say, this was many, many months later that I was actually able to do that. But it was powerful. And so after that, I was practicing, and I do a lot of practice in my bed when I wake up or in the middle of the night. I find lying down practice, especially in the early days, was really supportive. I'd had whiplash, and it just was nice not to have to do the whole sitting thing, which I actually like now, but then it was harder. So I started to practice that way. I would just like, okay, what am I feeling? Let me feel it. Let me let this guard down. Let me see what's here and allow it to be here. And I could feel my muscles unclench, and it was a big relief. But then some days what would happen is that instead of that dissipation, as I allowed myself to feel what was actually just happening, like stop fighting what's actually happening, I would get, instead of dissipation, intensification, like a ramping up. Instead of that bubbling up and then it letting go, it just went up and up and up. And I got more and more frightened and more symptomatic and it just went in from, sort of ruminating on to obsessing over to panicking about to full-blown panic attacks. And in the middle of practice, and I was just blown over by it, and it was so frightening. And it's only because I'd had this long, many months of support from mindfulness that I was like, okay, I'm going to keep going, because if not, I might have given up.
Well, and what you're saying, I think, is exactly what people are afraid of when we say, like, let it be there, like, feel it, lean into the emotion or the feeling of things so that you can let them go. But I think that exactly what you're saying is exactly what people are terrified of having happen. So what did you do? Keep going. I'm done. I'm at the end of my seat here.
Yes. Okay. What I did, and also I learned a number of things. One is we really have to let that guard down before we can feel. And I think that sometimes teachers don't do that, and probably even, concussion specialists who are interested in mindfulness, they say, okay, here, having the thing, now feel it. And it's like, then you're just in a battle with the guard, right? We have these protections that are up for a reason. And we have to learn how to let them down first before we can you have to take the Band-Aid off before you can get at that gaping wound, right? So that's a really important piece, but it has to be done so carefully and with such discretion and care, and an understanding and an honoring of the guard, thanking the guard for its protection, and then letting the guard know, hey, I really appreciate what you've been doing to protect me, but we don't need this heavy armor on right now. We're not at war. And when I am really in danger, you can come back and I need you. But right now, please let me be in peace here, So that was a big part. And then the next part is I learned, and this was through some trial and error and actually some terror, that I needed to learn to listen very, very carefully as I was practicing for the beginning sounds of a warning signal that I was becoming dysregulated before it became an alarm bell. Mm. And it requires a really tremendous amount of attention. And it's sometimes irritating. It's like, I don't want to have to pay that much attention to make sure I'm not going to go into a panic attack or dissociation, right? Like I don't want to have to pay that much attention, but if I didn't, then I would be lost, you know? So this is what I teach, is how to listen, and everybody's bodies are different. Everybody's signals are different. But we all have signs that show us that we're beginning to become dysregulated. We're beginning to have a fight, flight, and freeze response. Our body's beginning to launch that protective action. And so we can learn to notice the signs, and then we pause and we pivot and we proceed with what we need in that moment. And maybe we can continue being mindful, but just a different type. Like maybe awareness of breath practice is no longer serving. It's too close to the body. Maybe we need to go for a walk outside and enjoy the trees, and that will be more settling.
Mm. And I do think that it's so important to be aware of all of the, like, not all of them, but to be aware that there are different ways to practice it, to be in mindfulness and figuring out which ones are best suited for you in that moment. I think that's really beautiful. I'm curious, you talked about having it kind of lead to a panic attack. You also talk about dissociation. I'm curious what that what do you mean when you say that? What was that experience like for you?
Mm-hmm. So that was what I described now was sort of like at home practicing, and this was happening, and thankfully I had the wherewithal to figure all that out. Honestly, that was on my own. Nobody taught me how to do all, I didn't have a guide in that, and anyways, but then the other thing that I was doing was about 10 months after the accident, I actually took my first meditation retreat. And I went out to the University of British Columbia, and they put on these beautiful retreats for the weekend. And just arriving to this beautiful Asian center to spend a weekend with people in silence, honestly, is already amazing. For anybody who's, I had a 10-year-old daughter at the time. I was working part-time. I was still working more than I should. It was like, to have a quiet weekend, like, please, if you have the opportunity, go on a retreat, with the caveat of all the perils that can happen. But anyways, so we sitting there, and the teacher says, okay, now notice your breath. And I thought, great, here I go. I had been practicing what I had learned was taking these big inhales and long, slow exhales that I had learned. And then, but this teacher said, notice your breath and don't change it. And this is a very common teaching. Just notice what it's like, but don't change it. And I thought, what? Why would I want to stay short and shallow? Like that's what I need is this long, slow, deep breath that for me was like a magic portal to nervous system regulation. And for some people, honestly, awareness of breath is not that. It is completely dysregulating to them. Or for some people, it's not the right choice in a particular moment. But at that time, I would say that moment, that's when Mindful Concussion was born. That's when I had, like this kind of badass attitude. I'm not doing that. And so I just took my long, slow, deep breaths. And then he said, okay, go outside and walk and notice your feet walking and all, the typical mindful walking, which has many benefits as an anchor of attention and being embodied and all of this. But for me, that was no, I'm not doing that either. That there's all this beauty out here. I'm staying way more in the present by I didn't really realize it then, but what I was doing was savoring beauty. And letting all of the natural beauty, kind of like, there's the trees, and I'm enjoying that. And now I'm enjoying the breeze and the sun on my face and the flowers, just gently moving quietly from one anchor to the other and really letting nature be like a healing balm for me. And so I would come back from a 45 minutes of doing that and I'd be feeling fantastic. And I was happy that I hadn't spent the whole time paying attention to my feet, So and I even feel in me now just like a little tinge of shame, like, oh, Jessie's not doing it right. And all these modifications that I made naturally, tacking continually towards regulation. For a long time, I felt ashamed. And I'm going to tell you this other story as to why. So I then also in that time period, about a little bit later, almost a year and a half after the accident, I went to do the MBSR. Finally, I did the 8-week Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction program. And you have to remember the state I was in. So I had been working 3/4 time. I was still very sensitive to noise and light. Us brain injury survivors, we don't have proper filters for all of the auditory and visual inputs. So I was overwhelmed. I teach at a college, so you can imagine my job is 1000% cognitive. Grading is like all those multiple variables to hold in my brain is so hard. So I show up. It's like 7 o'clock on a Tuesday. I've had to take the bus, the loud bus, and I show up to the first class of the MBSR, and the teacher says, okay, now we're going to lie down on this floor in the dark. You don't know me and you don't know any of these other people, but we're going to just lie here for quite a long time, and we're going to pay a lot of attention to every little thing going on in the body. And I'm telling you, you don't have to, if you know anything about brain injury, it must be obvious that that is a bad first way to start. To me, it's a no-brainer. Like, why do I even have to write a book? It's so obvious. But anyway, so I did that. I was twitching, and then I went home. And let me be clear: there are so many aspects of the MBSR that are brilliant, and they have helped millions of people around the world. And I don't think it's a first step for many brain injury survivors. It is a good excellent second step. But the pedagogy of going so quickly to body scans that are so body based the chances of it being dysregulating are not worth it to me. So then I went home and did my homework. I'm a good student, and I put on my earbuds to listen to the body scan guided meditation, and somehow the recording ended, and I looked around and I was like, what happened there? I missed that. And I knew I hadn't fallen asleep. And now I know that I dissociated. Now I know that my body protected me, that it was way too overwhelming to pay that much attention to my body at that point in time, especially like from here to there and everywhere and no choice, just go and feel it all deeply. This interoceptive awareness inside of your, of your heart and your stomach, which is just a mess at that time. And so my body saved me, right? It said, no, that's way too overwhelming. We're going to protect you. We're going to shut that down. We're not going to do that. And so that's, but then I went back to class the next week, and everybody else seemed to be able to do it. And I felt that shame, like, man, why can't I do that? And I didn't do it again. Like, I stopped doing it because it was too much. But I felt shamed in it. But I also had enough chutzpah to be like, I'm not going to do what makes me feel way worse. That doesn't seem worth it, And other people don't. Other people just white knuckle their way through, and they can really re-traumatize themselves. And anyways, I later got connected with my mentor, David Treleaven, who wrote the book Trauma Sensitive Mindfulness and has a whole training on that. And I was so relieved when he used the word modification. And I realized, oh, I'm just modifying my practice. And I realized that it was wise and needed. And the only caveat I'll give is that because I'd had quite a lot of these challenges of panic and dissociation in the early days, it's taken me a long time to get brave enough to do some deep work with mindfulness practice because I fear those states. And even to this day, the word body scan, I feel like this tightness in my chest. So I feel so strongly that it is so important that brain injury survivors begin their practice with exercises that will give them a taste of the sweet goodness of the gathered mind and of the agency that they can have to calm their own nervous system. And once some of these basic skills are on board, then with that sense of, self-awareness, they can go on and do any practice. But if they do it in the wrong order, it's really can be problematic.
Yeah. So those perils, I really appreciate you sharing all of this so far. It sounds like diving deeply into the body right away is not going to be the best. It might be problematic for people. And I know that you mentioned at some point ones that are too cognitive as well. Can you talk about that? Like what might too cognitive of a practice look like?
So similarly, say on a lot of retreats or in many teachers will say, it's like a noting practice. Notice that you're thinking. Notice that you're feeling angry. Notice that your knee hurts. And it's the invitation to kind of say it, whisper in your mind. It's a very cognitive, and of course some people don't have a voice in their head, so we have to remember as teachers that not everybody has that. But for those of us who do, it's really without a brain injury, it's hard to imagine that speaking more to yourself in your mind would be exhausting, but it really is. And it was like, I don't want more cognition, I want quiet. Like I was just like adamant about that. I want practices that are fostering quieting my mind. And then there's teachers who will say, well, that's not the point of meditation. The point is wisdom and all this other stuff, which is fair enough, right? Like that is great for the longer term. And we can go much deeper and have very profound insights. But for the beginning, for a brain injury survivor, quiet and it is really essential. And so, for example, as well, there's some practices that instead of that coming back to one anchor over and over again, the concentration that I was doing, there's something called open awareness. So where you just kind of open yourself up to whatever's happening. So you might start by paying attention to the sensations of your breathing, and then you hear a noise and you pay attention to that, and then you come back to your breathing, and then you feel that your back hurts, so you feel that and you allow that, and it's like constantly moving. And honestly, not so much now, but in the early days, it made me nauseous. Like I actually did a guided practice with this one teacher one time, and I said at the end, I feel like throwing up. Like you're asking me to move my attention from here to there to there to there. I'm gonna barf, So that and then as well with the body scan, you're also moving. You're like, pay attention to your left toe and then up, and you're moving. That is hard on the brain. It's the of it, but it's when you move your attention from one place to another, there is a cognitive load to that. And so trying to reduce in the early days the amount of movement of the mind is really.
That is so fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. Very, very good insights to have as someone who cares about people dealing with brain injury and knows that there are benefits to mindfulness. So, go ahead.
I just remembered the word. It's called switch cost.
Oh, I did
switch
not.
Cost. The energy to, and in particular, like say you're doing an activity and then you go over here to do something else, and then you have to go back here and figure out where you were, what you were doing. It's all that cognitive load. Whereas with the brain injury, the brain, our pathways are so much longer. I don't know if I'm technically talking about it the right way, but it's every little bit of cognition has so much of a deeper impact than before. So reducing that where we can is important.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And is so fascinating. So the place to start sounds like it's the quiet mind, like just trying to be there with the mind, not intentionally doing specific things things or focusing too much inside the body. And tell me, do you know if because when I first learned about how mindfulness could be problematic for people, that was kind of I think if I remember right, that was the piece that was particularly challenging, is that bringing into the body, especially if there's been trauma. So and I don't know, maybe that is specifically for people who have dealt with trauma. You mentioned you have had trauma yourself. So maybe it's contraindicated because of the previous trauma, not necessarily the trauma from the brain injury. I don't know. Do you?
Mm-hmm. So lots to unpack there. So first of all, I think it's fair to say that most people that have a concussion that especially that goes on for a longer time are also trauma survivors, right? We're having bad falls, car accidents, assaults. And so then there's going to be varying degrees of amount of trauma that the actual thing that got your brain injury will have caused. And then there's growing, I think, evidence that people with prolonged symptoms have a tendency, doesn't mean everyone, but have a tendency to have had previous trauma, low, high ACEs scores. And it makes sense. If you meet your brain injury with a dysregulated nervous system, it's going to be doubly difficult, right? So for me, I had, I was born 2 pounds, 15 ounces, 6 weeks in the incubator. Like I had a lot of early childhood and other things, which I won't go into. But so the idea oftentimes of mindfulness is that as a society, we're disembodied. And of course it's true. Many of us are numb. We think, we don't pay attention to our bodies. We don't listen to the wisdom of our bodies. So mindfulness can be very powerful to have us actually listen. And that's that whole thing of, oh, wow, I actually have to listen when I'm thirsty, when I'm hungry, when I need to take a rest. So it's hugely helpful. But I would say that for brain injury survivors, and adding in that trauma piece as well, and so many of the symptoms are very similar, is that in many cases we're over-embodied. So many of us are just hyper aware of our symptoms and very focused on them, right? And so then there could be that some people are also disembodied and kind of a hypo-arousal, numb and not feeling their body. But I would argue, and I think there is, growing understanding that the idea of plunging your frozen, frostbitten hand into the hot bath is a bad idea, right? So we don't want to do that to our fragile nervous systems. We want to introduce embodiment so that we can realize, we don't need to pay that hyper attention to every symptom. We do need to pay some attention. If we're going to do pacing and taking breaks and all of these things, we need to pay attention to our bodies, but we need to learn to do it in kind of like soft vigilance rather than hyper vigilance. And then also with the hyper arousal, yes, we do need to thaw that freeze. But in order for that freeze to thaw, we need to viscerally feel safe enough to do so. And that's a long-term strategy. That's not something you do on day 1 of your mindfulness class, So it's about, so for me, what I gravitated to and what I teach is mindfulness of things that are not that deep interoceptive awareness, but instead, like, for example, vision. If people, maybe some people have vision problems, it's more difficult, but like, for example, looking at the color that you enjoy, my beautiful yellow walls here, or the taste of chocolate if you're not too nauseous. I have a recent blog on mindful chocolate eating, which is nice. So these kinds of things that are more outside of us rather than that deep internal to the body. And also there's something about, like, instead of noticing, so for example, if we notice the green tree, we use our mind. But if we savor the color green, we use our heart. And that difference for an injured brain is just like, oh, thank God I don't need to use this. The less I can use this, the better.
So the difference of not just like analyzing it with your eyes and trying to like notice all the things, but just like enjoying what is and just like seeing it without trying to break it down more than that. I guess I don't know how to, that's super, super interesting. That's so good. Okay. So how can people know what is okay for them to try and how they can maybe this is a silly question, how they can know if it's not good for their system? Like, will you know right away? Or is it something that you like, a lot of times people are like, oh, I did this thing, and then the next day I felt terrible. Like, how can they know if it's okay or not as they're practicing?
Yeah, it's a very good question. It takes a while, honestly, to build up your mindful necklace. And I always say that when people take my course, I say you're embarking on an 8-week, and it really ends up being a very much longer than 8-week journey, where your body is a beaker in a big experiment. And it is going to be some trial and error. There's so many variables. Everybody and every body is different. And so what you bring to it from your past, your previous health conditions, there's so much mixed in it, and then you bring in the brain injury, maybe new trauma, and then you've got your situation. So like somebody who is an unemployed person of color who's a single mom is going to have a way harder time than someone that has all kinds of other conditions like I did, a union with benefits, and I had a lot of support that helped me. So, but it takes time to really, as I mentioned before, begin to listen. Listen very carefully for the signs that show us that we're beginning to launch a fight, flight, and freeze response, and or we could just simply say a stress reaction, right? So you can think, what are the ways that you know that you have stress? You might notice sweaty hands, racing heart, headache, spinning thoughts. Everybody's different as to how it shows up for them. But once you start to notice and start to pay attention, then you can do what I had said before, this kind of pause, pivot. Okay, what do I actually need right now? This is not serving me. I'm starting to become reactive to this practice. What can I do instead? And it is true. Sometimes, especially as we're just learning and we overdo it, we do too much one day and we don't really feel it to the next day. And we learn over time that the push, crash method doesn't work. That we have to be cognizant of not doing too much. And also, of course, more and more research showing that being able to lean into our symptoms is important, right? If we're always so far back, then there can maybe not be as much growth and healing. But if we're always completely up against the edge and over the edge every day, all day long, there's also less chance of healing there. So it's in that sweet spot between the two, and it's a hard move.
It's hard to figure it out. But it is, I appreciate your example that it is possible, and the fact that you had an established experience knowing that you felt better doing these things, and then when you pushed into something that didn't feel good, it didn't scare you away from doing that. Like you were willing to keep moving forward, past the shame, past the things. Like you were willing to do what felt right in your body as you were moving and learning these things. So I appreciate that example, and I love that you are actively trying to learn from your experience and develop things that will be beneficial for people who haven't been had that opportunity yet, and you're going to be that guide for them that you didn't have yourself. So I really love what you're doing and how you're doing it. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what it is that you offer, what your program is like, and how people can sign up if they want to?
Sure. Yeah. I'm really happy to be on this journey of having survivors and the professionals who care for us realize how important it is to offer mindfulness for brain injury, like those powers, and then also, with a warning label. So I have every other month, I run a free Zoom call for survivors, and we practice mindfulness together. And it's lovely to come together in community, so people can go on my website and sign up for that. My signature 8-week course is something that I just at this moment only doing it if an organization or an individual therapist or something brings me on to do it for their clients. But honestly, at the very moment, my biggest focus is I'm writing my book. The Power and Perils of Mindfulness for Brain Injury, and that's wonderful. And as a part of that, I'm in the fall launching, well, okay, people might watch this some other time, but I'm launching a social media campaign about a phrase from a page. So the idea is I'm going to talk about a phrase from the draft, and my intention is to get input from people. What do you think? Does that resonate with you? And my idea is, why not get feedback before it's in print? So I really hope people will follow me on LinkedIn and Facebook, and I'm considering some of the other platforms to help me make this the best it can, both survivors that get this and professionals who have wise things to say as well. And the truth is, everybody's different, right? So for me, I really gravitated to these quieting, nervous system regulating. To me, was going from hyper arousal down. But there's other people that really what they need is to dance and go for a run, right? Like, everybody really is different. And I just invite that inquiry. So people can look at my Mindful Concussion website. So it's mindfulconcussion.ca is my website. And I have a blog and newsletter, and I just love sharing. I love hearing from people and engaging and getting more and more people interested in what I'm up to, and hopefully people will be keen to read my book.
Beautiful. I'm definitely interested. This is awesome. Do you have any idea yet at this point when the book might be coming out, like when we can look forward to that?
No, I don't. Not yet. No. But it's still in a rough draft, so it's not coming out soon. But it is coming along beautifully.
Good. I think it's really important, and encourage you in that. Please continue. I think that's beautiful, and I love what you're doing. And thank you so much for sharing all this. Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you want to make sure gets put out there, or any final thoughts here before we close? Just
thinking that one of the core pieces is for people to realize that they're in choice. That whether you go on an app, or you take a course, or whatever you do in the mindfulness space, if you're practicing, always remember that you have the dial on how much you want to feel, how much you can feel. You can dip a toe in, feel a little bit more. You can dip a toe out. You can pay attention to what is your body saying to you. Yes, this is good. I want more. And nope. And then we have to be careful of too much safetyism, right? Like being too much, like I'm not doing any of it, because it's learning, right? Learning's hard, and we have to stretch ourselves. And a big important part of my mentor David Treleaven's work around trauma-sensitive mindfulness is not only the idea of choice, but also the idea of titration. So we can feel into something that's a little bit challenging, because again, we're trying to let our body know our symptoms are not a threat. And we can let down that guard and feel in a little bit, and then we can pull out and pay attention to something that's more neutral or pleasant, and then go back in. And that's what I want to leave you with, is choice. And you're the one in control, and don't let any teacher tell you otherwise.
Beautiful. I love that so much. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. I really appreciate it. And I'm excited for all of this to be put out in the world so more people can hear it and learn from it. Thank you for what you're doing. It's awesome. Keep it up.
Well, I appreciate your enthusiasm. Thank you.
Okay,
I'm so glad you listened in today. I hope you have gained some helpful insights and inspiration regarding dealing with and recovering from concussions. My goal is to create more awareness and education about concussions and the fact that there is so much that can be done to improve life after someone has had one. Help me spread the message by liking, commenting, rating, and subscribing to this podcast, and share it with others who would benefit from hearing it. There are more resources available on my website. And again, if you or someone you love would benefit from concussion coaching, sign up for a free consultation using the link in the show notes or at my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com. Thank you. See you next time, and take good care of that amazing brain of yours.